Have you ever really stopped to think about how you think? I mean, really break it down? Today we're going to look at the actual blueprint of our own minds. We're going to treat logical reasoning not as some dusty academic thing, but as the very architecture that gives shape and strength to every single thought we have.
So that brings us to the big question. What is the architecture of a good argument? Because, just like a skyscraper needs a solid foundation and a strong frame to stay standing, our thoughts need a logical structure to be clear, coherent, and, well, to actually convince anyone of anything. And this is really the core idea for our whole journey today. The source material puts it just perfectly. Logical reasoning is the structural backbone of our ability to think for ourselves. It's the invisible steel frame holding all our ideas together. So, go ahead and grab your hard hat. In this explainer, we're the architects. We're going to break down the different parts of thinking and see how we can build a stronger, more sound mental structure piece by piece. And, every architect will tell you, you've got to start with the foundation.
Every great build starts with a solid foundation. And when it comes to our thinking, that foundation is the basic grammar of logic. These are the static, fundamental pieces of any argument you'll ever make.
Think of these as the concrete, the rebar, the steel beams of our mental structures. We've got our starting points, the premises and axioms. We have the super simple rules of true and false, that's Boolean logic. Then we define how broad our claims are with quantifiers. Words like all, some, or none. And we put them all together in classic structures like the syllogism. Let's dig into those first two, the most fundamental pieces.
Okay, let's zoom in on a premise. A premise is basically the ground you choose to build on. And this is so important. If your premises are weak or just plain wrong, then the entire argument, no matter how clever it sounds, is gonna be unstable. Everything, and I mean everything, rests on the strength of these starting points.
Now, axioms are a little different. These are the big ideas we accept without proof. They're those self-evident truths or deep core beliefs that we often don't even question. They're not just the ground we build on, they're the bedrock of our entire worldview.
All right, so our foundation is laid, it's solid. But a building isn't just a static object. It has systems that do work: plumbing, electrical, HVAC. For our minds, these are the engines of inference. They're the processes that actually do the work of thinking. So let's get them installed. Because, reasoning isn't just about collecting a pile of facts. It's an active process. It's about making what we call inferential leaps. It's how we get from what we already know to what we don't. And it turns out our minds have three main engines to make those leaps.
First up, we've got deduction. This is the certainty machine. It's when we go from a general rule down to a specific case. The classic example, right? If all humans are mortal and Socrates is a human, then Socrates has to be mortal. Simple. If your starting points are true, the conclusion is absolutely 100% guaranteed. It's the gold standard for logical purity.
Next, we have induction. This is our pattern finder. This is the engine that drives almost all scientific discovery. We see a bunch of specific examples, like, hey, every swan I've ever seen is white, and from that we infer a general rule. Therefore, all swans are probably white. Now, that word probably is key. It's not a guarantee, but it's how we learn from experience and build new theories about the world. And finally, there's abduction. This is our creative problem-solving engine. It's all about making the best, most plausible guess based on what you see. Think of a doctor looking at symptoms to make a diagnosis, or a detective at a crime scene. They're both using abduction, taking the evidence they have and forming the most likely story. It's how we come up with new ideas when we don't have all the facts. So let's just lay them out side by side. Deduction gives us that guaranteed certainty, which is perfect for math and logic. Induction lets us discover probable patterns, which is essential for science. And abduction helps us generate plausible new ideas, which is what drives innovation. A really great architect of the mind knows exactly which one of these engines to fire up for the job at hand. So, we've got our foundation, and we've installed our engines. What's next on the build site? Well, you need quality control, right? And inspection. We need these evaluative anchors to make sure our cognitive architecture is actually up to code and isn't going to collapse the first time it's challenged.
And these are the principles that keep our thinking rigorous. We need to back up our claims with solid evidence. We have to provide a clear justification for why our conclusion makes sense. We absolutely have to understand the difference between validity and truth. And finally, we have to learn to spot and avoid fallacies, those common structural defects in an argument.
Now this is a huge one that people get mixed up all the time. Validity versus soundness. An argument is valid if the structure is correct.
The conclusion logically follows the premises, but it's only sound if it's valid and the premises are actually true in the real world. You can build a perfectly logical skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand. It's a valid structure for sure, but it's not sound and, well, you know what happens next.
And that brings us to fallacies. The source material calls them the guardrails for our thinking, and I love that. Knowing what these common errors are, like straw man arguments or ad hominem attacks, helps us avoid making them ourselves, and it helps us see when someone else's argument might look good but is actually built on a flaw.
Okay, we did it. We laid the foundation, we installed the engines, and we set up our quality control systems. Now it's time for the fun part, seeing how all these pieces work together as a complete, dynamic system, the full reasoning loop.
So here it is, the whole process in action. First, we gather our evidence. Then, we perform an inference. We use deduction, induction, or abduction, and that gives us a conclusion. But, and this is so crucial, we don't stop there. A disciplined thinker then evaluates that conclusion for soundness, justifies it, and uses that whole process to deepen their understanding, before starting the cycle all over again. It's a loop.
So we've built this beautiful system, this elegant loop. But what separates a good architect from a true master? The master has one final tool. It's a tool so powerful it lets them step back, stress test their own work, and even be willing to tear it all down and rebuild it from the ground up.
So what is this master architect's ultimate tool? What's the secret?
It's the engine behind something called zero-based thinking. And really, all that means is having the intellectual courage to throw out your own assumptions and rebuild your arguments from scratch, from first principles. It's the ultimate defense against logical inertia. You know, just believing something because you've always believed it.
And this entire powerful process of reflection, of checking our own foundations, our engines, our quality controls, it's all driven by one simple yet unbelievably powerful meta question.
It's the simplest question in the world, right? Why? Just asking why we accept a certain premise, why a conclusion actually follows from it, why we trust our evidence. This one single question is the ultimate stress test. It ensures our cognitive architecture isn't just strong, but that it's also meaningful, and hopefully, true. It's what transforms you from just a builder into a master architect of your own mind. So, what are you going to build?